Cleary, Hines, both? Do you go for value? So many questions to answer here in our half gun section for 2023 NRL Fantasy. We're going to kick it off up top with Nico. I will go through my best guns and also my value guys at the end of this video when we summarize it all. But one by one, we have 18 of these players to go through. Nico at a 69 average there, 984k is our most expensive player in the game, and deservedly so, given he got the best average for the year. Pros for him, there's only 2 scores in the 40s, so if you're looking to bring him in as a captaincy option, which is something I'm definitely thinking about, that's obviously pretty safe, right? You're looking for anything, if they're getting lows, it's in the 50s, really. It's not really the worst. It's better scoring than most guys that you'll get. It's obviously a great captaincy option, stable, really good team. Nothing's really changed much for the Sharks, and I think this is great news for Nico Hines owners and anyone who's potentially thinking about him. Does he even play Origin as well? That's the big one for him. The cons, obviously the buy in round 6 is fairly early compared to a lot of other guns on this list or in other teams for sure. And has a pretty difficult first 3 games. They have the Raiders in round 3, which are probably the easiest one. But they're a team on the improve as well. But Nico has scored pretty well against the majority of teams. Obviously a little bit better against the lesser ones. But that is Nico up top, and I think he's going to be a great option. Nathan Cleary, it's finding it very difficult to split these two. A couple of cons we'll just start with now. I think there's obviously 70 mouths to feed at the Panthers. They do lose Kickow. They do lose Api Coruscant as well. Does that mean they head a little bit more to the right, given they've got Crichton on that side, Liam Martin, and also Brian Brian had a pretty down year compared to previous, and I will speak about him in great detail in further videos. But do they go down the right a little bit more, and does that help Cleary as well? That's something to think about. Do they have a little bit less direction at 9 without Api Coruscant there? Mitch Kenny, Sonny Luke, can they provide that direction for this club? And a little bit of a shorter preseason. He's been partying up a little bit overseas there. Obviously you're all at the World Cup. And they all only really just got back to training, where other teams have had a longer preseason. But does that matter too much? He's someone that has played well no matter what. He's coming off big injuries. He played with injuries and still scored well. So I don't think it matters too much for him per se. Maybe the team starts a little bit slower. We're not exactly sure, but it's definitely something to think about. Pros for Cleary, obviously being a top scorer multiple years in the game. The gun team, interrupted preseason I spoke about, but really no hundreds. That's the question. He hasn't really had any. He didn't have any last year, sorry. And the interrupted preseason I'm talking about was last year. So he came into round 4 last year. So he kicked off his year. So he gets a bit of a better preseason here, and no hundreds I think is a big one for him. So I think he's on par with Hines as a great pickup, and they don't have a buy till a little bit later. Cammy Munster in number 3 here, average 62, 886 was his price. Pros for him, obviously does so much in that team. He runs the ball. He has great attacking stats. He defends pretty well. Also, I really think he's going to average 60 plus again, somewhere around that mark you can see happening. There's really no reason as to why you think he would go under, and he's the 3rd best scorer. So really, he's going to have a great season no matter what. And if you really like watching him play, there's no issue in picking him up. I don't see him going down on that average. The cons, he's obviously a pretty inconsistent scorer compared to the above 2. Definitely has a bunch of scores in the 30s and 40s, which you don't see from Cleary and Hines. And will the team not be as good? They lose Brandon Smith. They lose a lot of a bunch of their forwards in Bromwich brothers and Felice Kafusi there. So does that change much? Do the young players come in and do really well? I'm not exactly sure. So that's just something to think about with Cammy Munster. Daly Cherry Evans. So 851k for him, 59 average. Pros for him, obviously amazing starter. Last year he absolutely killed it at the front. A couple of months there, which was great. He's super consistent. Had a really average finish to the year, with Manly really losing a bunch of their games. No Tom Trbojevic. So much turmoil at the club. So is that a pro? I think it definitely is. He's someone that has average in the low to mid 60s on a regular basis. So I can see him going back up into the 60s and clearly being a top 3 to 5 gun in this position. But he does obviously play Origin, which is something to think about. The off-field turmoil, does that cause more issues? They've lost Des. There's a bunch of things happening there. The team really needs to be okay for him to do really, really well. He can score pretty well regardless, but will they be good? Is Turbo going to be fit? There's a bunch of questions there, but I think Daly is going to be one of the top halves for sure. Adam Dewey. So 771k. He is priced up, unfortunately. You see here Dylan Brown has 20k less on his price, and he averaged 2.1 more. So Dewey's above that, which puts him about a 54 average, which is a little bit annoying. they're assuming that he's going to get the 6, but does he even get that spot? There's talk of him actually training at center. So my main issue for him is the fact that he has no set role. He could play some time in centers. If he gets a chance at 6, he's going to be really good. But that's the issues on that side. If you look at his pros, he averaged 62 playing at 6. So that would be an 8-point increase on his average. He does get involved in a lot of the attack. He has a better team this year. So he has Isaiah Papali'i on his right if he does play on that right side, which you'd imagine he would. Brooks being a left-handed side player. There's a few more weapons for him. And you've got Api Coruscant to give him good service. So I can see him, if he does get the 6, being a superstar and having a lot of value, at least 5 points. You'd expect him to average around that 59, 58, and has that upside into the 60s if he can get a whole year at that role. What it might mean, though, is that he doesn't have to do everything, which it looks like when he does get the 6 role. He's basically doing it all. When it goes to the right, he's scoring himself. He just has so much talent. I think he can do that in this Tigers outfit, but there's obviously a lot of questions there. Dylan Brown, a 751, as I said, 52.6 average. Pros for him has a really good base and added some attacking stats last year. I actually started with him last year, for those that are new, and he did a great job for the majority of the season. Main issue for him was that he was a pretty inconsistent player. So he did improve in his scoring and his actual NRL play, but just was pretty inconsistent, especially in, overall. Yeah, basically had a bunch of really good games, had some weak ones, went good again, had some weak ones again, and then finished well in a couple of games that Moses was out, so he was the main player in that team. So that's when his average increased for those few games. There weren't too many, but those few, he did really, really well. So I think Brown, I can see him averaging probably similar in this squad. They might drop down a level. That's the only worry as well with the Eels, but he will be solid. Mitch Moses, a little bit different to Brown, because the main issue with Brown is he doesn't get the kick meters, and that's obviously goes to Mitch Moses. So you have two guns in the same team. He's super talented as well, and plenty of attacking stats, which gets him up to that 52.3. But the main issues for Moses, and it's the same every year for me with him, is that he has that low average, so that lower 50s average, and hasn't really exceeded that in the bunch of years that he has been a focal point in this pretty solid Eels side, to be honest with you. Very streaky. You'll have times where he's an absolute superstar and everyone wants to put him in their side because he does get the big kick meters, he runs the ball, gets plenty of attacking stats, but unfortunately not enough tackles and run meters. So when he does run the ball, he seems to make tackle breaks and offloads, and there's plenty going on, but there's a lot of games where he just doesn't run the ball enough. So that's that with Moses. Jamal Fogarty, so 723, averaging 50.6. Definitely does do a little bit of everything. He kicks the goals, and he's in an improving team. He has scored well in the last few years when he did get plenty of 80-minute games at halfback for the Titans. He did really, really well. But my cons for him, I just can't see much of improvement on that 50 average. He's been around about that in all of his 80-minute efforts, whether it's in the Titans and in a better Raiders side. He really actually helped them. So I think NRL-wise, he was great for him, and he's going to improve their squad again this year with roles really set in stone, Hudson Young, Tarpany, these kind of guys really excelling, and Foggs and White and doing their thing. They've got a nice squad there. Cons for him, I just, as I said, just can't see the improvement, and he's always around this average. So Sean O'Sullivan there, 719k, average of 50.4. He's a very interesting prospect for me. He gets his own team this year, moves to the Dolphins. He's going to have a lot more continuity that he didn't have at the Panthers. He seemed to come in and obviously play during the Origin period. He played at the start of the year when Cleary was out. So there's a bunch of those games where the team was decimated through Origin or injuries or whatever it was. So the team wasn't as good, which just shows that there might be a little bit of improvement on that. The main issue I see, though, is the fact he's with the Dolphins, and they're probably slightly better than a decimated Panthers team, who would, probably about a 50% win to loss ratio. But really for him, it's, how is that all that going to come together? It's really on him to do well for this squad. And if he can, they're going to go pretty solidly, the Dolphins. I think he has the opportunity to do that. He has no Origin, so I can just see him being an option at some point, but probably not from round one. I'd say it's probably a little bit risky. When you look at his cons, he had 4 out of his 11 games were in the high 30s, so that's pretty scary to start with, to be honest. You don't want to start with a player that can get a couple of 30s. It might be 2 out of the 4, 2 out of the 5 first games. He gets some 30s, and he's averaging about 43, and you end up just punting him for a better gun or a cheapie somewhere else. So I think he'll have his chance at some point, maybe through the Origin period. He is a good buy. We move to one of the first value guys I see, and that's Matt Burton. So a 718k, he had a 50.3 average. And just to start off with, we talk about his first 7 rounds. He did average 39 in those and had a little bit of a slow start. They had a really tough draw to kick it off. And we did speak about it, that would soften up, and the Dogs went on a much better run. He played a lot better. There was plenty happening there. So that middle period, he actually averaged 61 in that middle 13 rounds. And then the back 4, he averaged 33. So that's why he ends up down at that 50 average. But if you can see his team improving, it's the second year of the team to himself. In that better team, is there going to be more consistency on his part and also the team's part? Will they win a few more games? If they do, you'd say he'd be the focal point. They do have Reed Marnie in there to control things through the middle, and I can see him having a great season. Where I think he's going to be averaging, I'd say 55 to 58, I think is pretty fair. So that gives him around 5 points of value on those other guys that are above him, the Moseses, the Browns, stuff like that. So I'd rather pick Burton for sure, but you got to base it off what you think is going to happen with the Dogs. Will they really improve, or will they kind of just be a 11th or 12th type of team, maybe fighting for the 8? Who knows? Adam Reynolds at number 11 there. We've got 707k, 49.6 average. He had an awesome start last year. He just wasn't the same after the injury. So potentially, is there a couple of points of value? I'd say so. I just can't see an average over 55. So maybe a 42, he could, a 55. Maybe a 52 average, a 53 across the season, but he will have points given that he's older, that he might have some injuries. He's someone that's had a few hamstring injuries and etc. in the past. So does that happen going forward? He's probably someone I'm going to leave out, and I'd much rather go for Burton, who's younger, in a team that's probably going to be on par or slightly better than the Broncos. Who knows at this point? But yeah, I'd rather go Burton for sure. Hughesy, I'm probably going to leave him out as well. He was annoying at times last year. I had him in my squad and just didn't have a great season like he did in 2021. And I'm going to put that down to the game being a lot faster and really suiting his type of play, running off the back of offloads, really good run of the footy himself, really pouncing on tired defenders. And he really dropped down across the board. Missed tackles increased, unfortunately. Tackle breaks were down, try assists, everything across the board was down. Can he step up? Because you're obviously getting him at his worst over the last couple of years. He doesn't have origin, so maybe he's a player that you pick up during the middle of the year. I, again, feel he's too risky at this point. The 13 tackles and 3 misses is pretty yuck. You're only getting 7 from that, and that is why you will never really see a 60-plus average from Hughes, is the amount of those tackles. The good tacklers, the DCEs, the Clearys, are up around that 20 tackles and 2 misses. So that's a massive difference in terms of the amount of points you're getting from tackles. It's pretty close to 10 there. Jackie Wyden, so 667. We're getting down to the cheaper guys. And what we're looking at here is if they have any potential to move up into gun status there. 46.7 average for him. Pros for him, he had a very low try and assist numbers last year. Attacking stats across the board were down very dramatically for Jackie Wyden. And I think in an improving team, he can bounce back from that. He's such a good player. We've seen what he's able to do in the centers, out of position, off the bench, whatever he needs to do for the Blues in Origin, and I think he can have a little bit of a bounce back season. Probably average somewhere around the 50 mark, but I just don't see that as enough, unfortunately. As I said, never been a gun in NRL Fantasy, and he's pretty inconsistent. If he scores a try, he's going to do great. If he doesn't, he's very likely to get somewhere in the 30s or 40s. AJ Brimson. So we have a dual position guy to start off with, a 665, 44.9. Pros for him is obviously really streaky kind of player. He's have good sections, bad sections, and I think he could be good at a certain stage. Cons for him, the last month really killed his value, absolutely smashed it. When Tanner Boyd was in there, at, they were playing 6 and 7 together. Oh, sorry, and Brimson was at 1, I believe, for a bit there. And he's just never been a keeper, so I don't see him as being an option at the start, so I think we'll move on. If you want me to talk a little bit further about him, or if you have any questions, just drop it in the comments below. Benny Hunt, 646, average 45.2. He had an amazing year last year and still averaged 45, so I think that has something to say about a bunch of his things, and we'll go through that. The pros, he obviously has to do everything at the Dragons. He's an absolute superstar of a player. You see that through club footy, through Origin, playing for Australia whenever he does that. He's obviously great. The cons, he's in a bad team, and the 12 tackles and 5 misses per game says it all. He's getting 2 points per tackle with tackles. It's about 15 points under some of the best halves in this game. So that's where that 60 average is coming from, is just him missing so many tackles, because he does plenty in attack. It's just yuck. I'm just going to be avoiding him. Jackson Hastings, 645, average 45.1. I know a lot of you guys will be interested in my chat on this one. I'm definitely interested in Hastings as a player. If you look at the pros here, from last year, he averaged 59 pre-injury. So he did have a really weird foot ankle injury, which, you know, he kind of tried to push through, but he just wasn't able to kick. He wasn't able to do a lot, which dropped his average down. So you just completely take them out of the equation. He is back to full health and he has moved team. What happened in that first 5 games? That's what he had, 5 games. That was what the pre-injury was. That's what I should have wrote there. He did have 6 missed tackles in that time. So just over 1 a game, which is really good. So he's obviously a solid defender. You can see when he was struggling on that injury, he wasn't able to run properly, kick, whatever. He wasn't feeling his best. He did have a few missed tackles in that time. So I'm happy to wipe that away. Even if he did add a couple extra missed tackles to that, he still has a really strong average in the mid to high 50s. So he moves from the Tigers, who are an average team, to Knights, who are an average team. I see that as a nothing. The only good thing here is it's his team and he's going to have Frizz on his right shoulder, which I think him coming off a bit of an average year, I think is going to be great for him. Great for both of these players that he has someone really strong on that right side there. Collins is playing with the Knights and a very limited sample from him back in the NRL since his days at the Roosters. All right, Tommy Dearden. So, 638, average 42.1. The pros for him, he's an improving gun. Had a really, really good season for the Cowboys. He obviously played Origin and was great through the final series. So, 51.8 average in that last 6 games shows that he has the potential. Cowboys obviously doing well. If they come out really hot this year, he could average somewhere around that 50 mark. The main issues with Tommy is the fact that he has low kick meters, with Townsend taking the majority of them, sending him around the park, and he's a maybe for Origin. You know, he may have secured that 6. Maybe Sammy Walker could be in there, which we'll speak about now, who's another guy I feel there's potentially some value there. A 638, average 42.2. Comes in the exact same as Dearden there. Pros for him, when he moved to 7 in the back end of last year, the Roosters played really well. They looked a lot better than, no knock on Keary, but Walker was absolutely spectacular in that role there. He had that 50 average at 7, and he's in a good team. He's an improving player. He will most likely play Origin this year. You'd imagine he gets an opportunity, unless Dearden continues to really dominate. And the cons for him, obviously that 37 average at 6. So if he does play 6, then I'd be avoiding him. If he plays 7, there's an opportunity for him to have some value and get over 700k. 3.4 missed tackles per game is also not exactly ideal, but that is that with Sammy Walker. Okay, we move to the guns and the value. So I see, obviously, a few of the value guys could potentially be in this top 4 or 5, but to show it up straight up there, we've got Hines and Cleary. I can't really split them. I'm personally thinking Hines at the moment, but even just doing this analysis, I'm looking at Cleary, just given the fact that he had no hundreds last year, had an interrupted preseason. There's plenty going against him last year. I think that this year could be a little bit of a bounce back for him, and he could average the same as Hines or slightly above, but I think both are good options there. Cleary having a buy a little bit later. DCE number 2, I have him edging just over Munster, probably a little bit extra value on DCE, especially if Turbo's there. And they play really well. He's going to get plenty in his favour. Munster, I can see him averaging 60. You can't go wrong with him. And then Adam Doueihi, if he gets the 6 role, I can see him being probably the 4th best player on this list. If he gets centre, you don't touch him. And the value guys, I have Burton probably just ahead of Hastings, just because there's a few more knowns with Burton. He's obviously a superstar. Hastings has been a little bit out of the game for a while, moving around teams. There's plenty going on there. He's in the Knights, whereas I think the Dogs will be a better team. So just have Burton just ahead of Hastings, and then Walker. I actually see a fair bit of value in him as well if he gets that 7 role and he continues to improve, kicks goals better, which he was doing for the last part of the season. So there's the half guns video, guys. Hope you enjoyed that one. We'll catch you in the centers and also the wing fullbacks.